Ghana's economy expands by 6.3% in Q2, driven by booming services sector.
Now, the growth of 5.6% contributed 83% to the agricultural sector growth of 5.2%.
Hi, great people of Ghana. It's your Nigerian God pleasure bringing you political news in our channel, Ghanatube. Ghana is actually making waves, making us happy, making sure that everything works together. As we all know, that President John Mahama is actually not backing down from his accountability, from his campaign and his promises, which he has actually been dishing out to us one by one. Not just him, the minorities and the majorities are still pulling strongholds. You also know that our channel is always here to bring you all the news, trending news your way. Please watch.
Meanwhile, information and communication grow by 21.3%, the highest among all subsectors. What is driving this rapid growth and how can Ghana leverage it for long-term development? We will discuss. Plus, a surge in cyber crimes in Ghana with losses hitting 14.9 million Ghana cedis. We'll be delving into that coming up. My name is Darrell Kwao. Thanks for being with us. Stay with us for details. Ghana's economy grew by 6.3% in the second quarter of this year, according to data released by the Ghana Statistical Service in Accra today. The strong performance was driven primarily by the services sector, which recorded a growth rate of 9.9%. The sector not only posted the highest growth among all sectors, but also remained the largest contributor to the country's GDP. Here's government statistician Dr. Hassan Idrisu.
Earlier that the nominal GDP for agric was 74.1 billion Ghana cedis. And here, crops alone generated 67.5 billion, with the rest distributed among livestock, forestry, and fishing. So you can see that crops is basically the largest component of agriculture. Now, in real terms, the 9.6 billion Ghana cedis that agriculture generated for the economy, we had 7.4 billion of it coming from crops, and then followed by 1.2 billion livestock, and fishing 0.5 billion, with forestry bringing in 0.4 billion Ghana cedis. Now, the growth of 5.6% contributed 83% to the agricultural sector growth of 5.2%. So the crops basically has the highest component of agricultural sector output. At the same time, we are seeing crops grow very high at 5.6%. And the point that we are making is that this 5.6% growth recorded by crops actually generated the highest contribution, and then in the agric, the highest.
All right, so that was the government statistician addressing the press a while ago. Joining me on Zoom is economist Professor Patrick Isuming. Good afternoon to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on the marketplace. What are your key takeaways from the latest release by the Statistical Service, and also the fact that in the second quarter the growth rate was 6.3%?
Good afternoon to viewers. Thanks for having me. I think that it's an extremely strong growth report. It's positive all around. I think that the first thing that probably people haven't taken note of is the fact that the first quarter growth has been significantly revised up. When the report was released in June, the first quarter growth was estimated at 5.3. In the current release, it's been updated to 6.3%. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact. It means that actually in the first quarter, the economy grew much stronger than initially estimated. Then, obviously, we've seen that the second quarter has also picked up 6.3%, which is very strong. But the other thing that is also important to note is that if you compare sector by sector, or the subsectors, even though the first quarter growth was strong, you realize that at the same time, 6 of the 20 subsectors have seen a contraction. This time, we've seen that only 2 subsectors saw a contraction. So it tells you that this growth is extremely broad-based. And then we're beginning to see certain very important sectors also doing very well. Electricity, I always look out for electricity production, and we realize that electricity, which had suffered down the years, is also seen a very strong growth rate this time. We've seen that cocoa sector, which has seen contraction last year, even though the recovery is marginal, but at least we've moved into positive territory for 2 consecutive quarters. That's great. Then we've seen manufacturing still performing strongly. So I think overall, this is a very, very strong growth report.
Is this growth sustainable, or is as a result of short-term factors?
Quarter on quarter like this, then you begin to see that perhaps, a real recovery is taking shape. And especially when it's so broad-based, and you also look at where the growth is coming from. Last year, even though the growth was strong, you saw that mining and quarrying, which usually is based on pre-planned and pre-programmed activity, because oil production, for instance, when they are scheduled to come on stream, they'll come on stream. Or even some of the major mines that were opened. But this time, what we are seeing is that we're seeing a much more diverse growth from more sources. So I think it's beginning to tell you that we are moving beyond just positive feeling from the economy. And you also, if you look at the expenditure side, the GDP presented by expenditure, you see that consumption is growing strongly, and then business gross fixed capital formation is also growing very strongly. So I think we're beginning to tell you that now there's some real recovery taking shape.
Yeah, I want us to talk a bit more about the services sector, because we recorded a growth of 9.9%. Of course, the economy being dominated by services. I mean, previously there have been arguments about agriculture and industry being pretty much the backbone of the economy, where the concentration should be. What does this say about the structural transformation of our economy?
Well, I think it still has to be the case that the major transformation has to happen in agri and especially manufacturing. So the services sector has become big, but you have to understand there are some dynamics. The services sector, we have the low end and the high end, like repair of goods and services. Those are low end. But if you look at higher end, like ICT, like banking and insurance, those are also sectors that, they are high end, but that Ghanaian participation in those areas are relatively limited. So I think it's important that, while services are growing, we have to understand that, the productivity and job creation mostly will come from manufacturing and also agri. So it's great that services is picking up, but let's not be mistaken. I think we still have to ensure that agri and in particular manufacturing are doing great. That's where a lot of the transformation should come from.
What should the government be doing then?
So I think when it comes to agri, or when you look on paper what the government has put out in terms of the 24-hour economy, starting with the Grow 24, on paper it sounds great. We just need to see the implementation starting, and the government sticking to what they are saying they are going to do, focusing on that voter enclave, making sure that we are producing the foodstuff in sufficient quantity. When we're able to do that, then it gives us the room for us to be able to produce enough foodstuff and also fruit and vegetables. Then we can move into agro-processing, as the government has put on paper. But it's also important that we begin to see energy production doing well. So electricity doing well is good, because you can't produce the 24-hour economy that has been promised. It won't happen if electricity production is suffering as it used to. So I think we need to now begin to see government implementing its own program. I think the program looks okay, it looks good on paper, but we need to start the implementation, and then let's see where that will take us.
So non-oil GDP, we understand, grew by 7.8%, outpacing the overall growth rate. What does this indicate about our diversification away from dependency on oil?
So I think we've seen that in recent times, the non-oil GDP going strongly. Indeed, you realize that mining and quarrying, where we count our oil GDP, is the sector that saw the biggest contraction. So I think in general, it means that perhaps, it means a couple of things. One, that we haven't built enough linkages. So it means that when that sector is contracting, it's not dragging other sectors along. Unfortunately, that will also mean that when that sector is expanding, it's not going to pull other sectors along. So in terms of making sure that we build strong linkages, it means that that particular extractive sector, we have not connected it to the other real sector. But at the same time, we know that that sector is capital intensive and Ghanaian participation is relatively limited. So it's good that we are actually seeing broader based growth. And I think it's we know that is a sector that it's more, its growth is a little bit more volatile than the other sectors. So I think it's okay.
Yeah, you've spoken about what the government needs to do going forward. I'm sure as the government looks at these figures, they probably will be smiling. But what's your outlook for the next quarter, looking at the events of the last few months?
So I think you notice that because a new government has come in, usually it takes a long time for the government to start implementing its programs. So the first quarter in particular, and to some extent the second quarter, it is based on, the fact that there's been a change and the government has started well. We are beginning to see the currency, went to some, saw some appreciation, and Ghanaians were very positive about it. So those positive sentiments are good. But now we need to back up this growth with real government activity. The government have to start implementing these programs, and then we really begin to see. So I think to the extent that, it takes a while to form the government, and it takes a while for government to start implementing these policies. I think this is a very strong beginning. And we have to hope that the government continues on the path that it started, and that, we avoid missteps. After 2 years, everything will turn to the election, and then that's where, following a logical plan becomes problematic. So I think it's important that the government from now on start implementing its real sector programs.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Patrick Isuning, an economist there, sharing his thoughts on the second quarter GDP estimates. You're watching The Marketplace. We're taking a short break. When we come back, we'll talk some more about the GDP estimates from a tech perspective. Are we seeing a digital boom?
Please do well to like, comment, and follow. Put on notification bell so you get all our news one by one. Thanks, man.